Hey, welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. This is Conversation 80, and I'm your host, Shane Lawrence. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. Before we get going, though, I've got some exciting news. Ed is doing our first ever live check-in. That's with a live audience. It's happening on February 7th. If you're going to be part of the upcoming NCTCA Teachers Convention, then this is your official invite. We will be podcasting live out of the CKUA on February 7th at 10 o'clock. We'll be starting with the session all about podcast PD and why it's good for you, which you probably already know. And then we'll be doing a check-in with some audience participation to go alongside it. It's going to be a great time. I'm super excited about it. Hope to see you there. And the other piece of news is that MAD PD is coming up. If you missed this last year, MAD is not a special PD conference for angry teachers. No, it is Make a Difference PD. It's on Sunday, May 5th, 2019, and educators from around the globe are going to come together with one goal, which is to make a difference for the greater education community. They share their best ideas that make a difference in their classrooms. And MAD PD is all free for both presenters and participants. If you want to know more about it, you can head to bit.ly/MADPD2019. bit.ly/MADPD2019. Hope to see you then. All right, now let's get to my conversation with my first ever art teacher, Kate Lindquist. All right, well, officially, thank you and welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited.
Me too. And you know, one of the main reasons why I'm excited is because I have never had an art teacher on my show before.
Well, I'm glad to be the first one, or excited to be the first one.
This is Conversation 80.
What was that?
This is Conversation 80. So this is kind of an oversight.
Wow. Well, hopefully I can give you some insight or viewpoints that you haven't heard. And we'll investigate and kind of go on an interesting little adventure. Absolutely.
I mean, you are, as I said, you're the first art teacher. So really anything you say from here on out is just absolute gospel. You speak for them all. So
I will try my best.
Well, Kate, I've kind of already tipped my hat a little bit here, but what is it that you do in the education world? What's your assignment?
My personal assignment is to just open the minds of students, educators. I guess as an educator, my viewpoint is, yes, I do teach art, and yes, art is my go-to, and it's something I've done since I was a kid. But I just want to open their minds. Because once we can open up their minds to the possibilities of what's out there and what they are capable of doing, then the possibilities are endless as to what we can put in there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No one has ever answered this question like this before. I like it.
It's the art teacher way of talking, I guess. But
oh yeah, you art teachers, you're a weird bunch, aren't you?
We are. We are. But I mean, I do take so I am very big into using the arts simply as a lot of times I'll say it's like the platter that we can use to deliver the other materials through. So most of my projects start off as, oh, that's a really cool book. I'll be at Target, and which most of us teachers seem to congregate at. And I'll think, I love the cover. I love the story. And I'll use that kind of as my starting point for a project then. Or a really cool STEM idea or science thing they're learning in class. A lot of times I'll go to teachers and say, what are you learning? Like, what are you teaching them? Because it's a lot easier for me to know what they're learning and make a project that can expand on it. And it just kind of it reinforce that information that's coming into them.
Right. So can you give me an example of something like that?
Sure. So for example, our third graders in Palm Beach County, we're learning about species, all the different areas of science with animal classification. And the teacher's like, we don't know what to do for like a culminating activity. We have no time. We have like the typical pressures of being an educator. And so I said, okay, well, you guys, I have a basic understanding of biology and all of that stuff. And my bachelor's is in science, so I'm good. I got that. You guys teach them the facts and what you're doing. Show me your kind of overall guide. And then what we'll do in the art room, and what we ended up doing was creating our own creatures. And then they had to draw it, give it all of its different characteristics. Be it, does it have scales? Is it an amphibian? Is it warm-blooded, cold-blooded? We had to choose where it lived. And then they also wrote all of the facts about it. So we took all of the stuff they were learning in their classroom, and in the art room were able to create their own creature. So they had to name it, they had to classify it, they had to say what's its setting, where is it, does it have any adaptation? So we try to use a lot of the words that the teachers were using within the art room, as well as enforcing some art stuff as well. So I'm very big on throwing a few things in here, like color scheme, or do you are these images fitting, or like half of your paper is empty, so how can we fill in that space so it's balanced? Because that's an art term, is balance.
Right.
So it's like just me merging everything into one. The kids had a blast. They asked if we could make more. I said, well, we could, or you can make some over break and show me back, because I got another project lined up. But what I think, and what's really cute too is they'll say, how'd you know we're learning this? I'm like, I have my ways. Just so it does catch them off guard too, to be surprised that what they're learning in their classroom isn't just in their classroom, that it can go outside and beyond that.
I love it. That's a really great approach to art. I mean, we always say that those sort of things are foundational. They kind of get pushed off on the side as options, but I think something like the artistic expression can be really foundational to just as a way to understand the world. I mean, that's how I sell my film studies class to my kids.
Yeah, completely. It's our most basic form of communication. If we go back to prehistoric times, was music and like cave drawings, or what we would consider paintings now. And we went into hieroglyphics. And a big thing that comes up with the older kids is, oh, I can't draw. And so I'll write my name on the board. And I said, what did I just do? And they're like, oh, you wrote your name. I'm like, no, I drew. Because those are, in art, there's a straight line, there's a diagonal, we've got a circle, another line. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, like you see these, like, you literally see light bulbs going off, and it brings that fear of drawing away. And I said, we just give it a fancy name of writing, but you guys draw every single day. Our handwriting is a beautiful expression of who we are.
Yeah. So as you said, our writing is a beautiful expression of ourselves. I looked at my own writing. I'm like, beautiful.
Well, it's your inner self. I know we all, I think I posted or tweeted, I always get mixed up with the words. I tweeted something about handwriting, and it does truly express who we are. There's the people who are much more focused on detail, so they usually have a lot like finer handwriting, or just regular writing. Or if you're a fast thinker, you kind of get a little more of a scratchy edge, or do you tilt it? And is it more of like an italic writing? So I think handwriting is fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, there's a whole field of that, just sort of analyzing psychology through handwriting, isn't there?
There is, yes. And you can take tests on it and stuff. But to me, it gives you a little bit of insight into like who is this person before I even have to kind of get to know them. Where a lot of people, I think we all have our ways of kind of figuring out who people are. And that's one tool for me, is like how fine-tuned is their writing, and what do they do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of one of the students I had. I still remember her name, but she was just the most hyper organized, detail oriented person I've ever met. And she had her writing, she could switch fonts. So depending on her mood for the day, she would have a different font when she handed stuff in, because this was at the time we were still doing everything by hand. And it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know even for me, if I'm sitting down to do like a lesson plan, and I am a little old fashioned. I still do things by hand as well.
Mm-hmm.
It might be my art side too.
Mm-hmm.
It does become a much more crisp and clear, so I know someone else can read it. But if it's just me journaling, it's much more fluid and it's more expressive of who I am. So it is interesting how we can switch fonts, as you said. We can switch our personalities if we need to a little bit to fit in with who we are for the day.
Yeah, so it's almost like a tool for the task kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it.
Yeah. But we got to back up here though, because I mean, you kind of blew my mind off the start, and I just needed to kind of reel for a moment and come back to it. You talk about your assignment in the education world as being one who needs to open the minds of the students. I mean, how did you arrive at that?
I guess for me, I've always been a curious little kid, and to this day, I will call myself a curious little kid. And seeing that in the classroom, there's a lot less curiosity going on. And to me, curiosity is the essence of learning. If you're not curious about something, you're not going to go learn about it. And so academics has always come easy for me, and art was something I just kind of, it comes through my hands. I don't know really where it comes from. And have been noticing recently a lot of students can't see past, like, okay, I'm just at school, I'm getting my grade, and call it a day. Someone made a comment in one of my classes a few years back. They said, well, can't you just draw it for me? And I said, well, I could definitely, but would your math teacher just do your math for you? And they said, no. And I said, well, would your English teacher write your paper for you? And they said, no. I said, well, why is it different in the art room? And they said, because it's the art room. And I think that was the moment for me that made me realize their minds are a little bit shut, that everything is categorized, and it's time to kind of open them up and say, whoa, anything goes in here. So that's, I think, been a reason why I've a lot of times brought in the other subjects into the art room, so they see that it's not just this four walls where all we do is art. Mm-hmm. A lot more occurs in there.
Yeah, that's actually really smart. That's something I'm trying to do with my own kids as well. I teach computers and just trying to, get them out of the mindset that, the things we do in here only happen in here. And I mean, art is certainly the same way. I mean, I remember my favorite part of biology in high school was getting to do the drawings of the dead stuff, because that's just so much fun.
It's very interesting. I don't really know when this kind of came about, or I don't remember it as a kid. To me, everything was sort of, maybe it's just who I was. I was curious about everything. So I was always, one day I was out in the yard playing with the little tadpoles, and the next day I was doing some science experiment with my magnifying glass, and probably had my mom saying, Kate, stop that. But
stop burning the ants.
Well, no ants. I would never kill something, but just seeing, just being curious. And I don't know if it's technology or video games, and I don't want to put blame on one thing. But I think we're in a different time, and it's my job now is to just keep these brains open, because once they're open, we can keep throwing stuff in there and asking questions. But it's unlocking those brains, which some of them are sealed shut so tightly.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what's the trick? Because I think you're right. I mean, I'll blame cell phones and Google. I mean, when I have conversations now, there's never any more, who is that person in that show, or what happens if this happens? And you don't have to wonder anymore. You don't have to, there's no space for curiosity. You just be like, okay, Google, ask the question, answer, done. So how do you work around that? This week's episode is brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from, and if you choose Park Power, your money stays here. Plus, Park Power shares its profits with local not-for-profits that are working to make a difference for their communities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Kozowski, and we love local here at the Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. You can learn more at parkpower.ca. All right. Let's get back to me and Kate.
A lot of times it takes pulling teeth for like the first half hour of class, and then we usually have 10 minutes left. So it's a lot of work. What I've learned is, one, you have to have a ton of enthusiasm. And my kids will probably say she's crazy and she's silly. I will dance around if I have to. I will make up songs. But I also think it's important to model for them how to ask questions, like how to be curious, because I think they don't know. Like you're saying, everything's right at our fingertips. I can just go to Google and it'll give me the answer to what's 5 times 7. I don't have to even think. So I'll throw out, well, what if it's on top of a house? Or what if you're going back to that animal project, for example? What if your creature like lives in a fishbowl in somebody's refrigerator? That's a habitat, right? Is it? And they'll look at me like, that can't happen. I said, but it could. Like, it's a what if. So I think it's a lot of times I will throw out what ifs or how comes or could this be? And I'll get a lot of like, that's not possible. And I'll say, but it's the art room. Anything's possible. So it's learning to teach them how to ask those weird questions. And they slowly catch on. But like I remember my kindergartners, especially because they're a creative group, they haven't quite their minds aren't quite shut down yet. And we did a teddy bear project, and I said, it doesn't have to be brown. It could be rainbow, it could be polka dot. And once you just give, especially with that age, once you give 2 little answers like that or ideas, oh my gosh, I have one turning them into superheroes. One of them puts a ninja mask on it. But that's what I want, because they're actually thinking like it's more than a teddy bear.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from a very sort of, ground level kind of view, I mean, what you're doing is we're building neural pathways. And, the way to do that is, force them into other areas they haven't explored before. I mean, that literally forces the brain to start thinking in new ways. And, if it can't think in those ways, it has to build the bridges to make that happen. So that sort of stuff is awesome.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it. And it's one of those things. I know we all have our knack, and that for me comes naturally, which I'm blessed that it does. Kind of having to think on our feet and be like, okay, how am I going to get these kids to, I guess, buy into that a teddy bear does not have to be brown. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of on your toes thinking, but it keeps my brain alive. I have to say, I thank my kids more than anything, because without them, my brain would start shutting down as well. They keep me as curious as I try to keep them.
Yeah. What makes you curious?
Everything. I really do. I honestly, that's a hard question. Like math and science are big things for me, especially how they relate to the world around us. But even people interactions, we do work with a large population of our school, and I hate labels, but I can't really say it any other way without people being like, what's she talking about? But we have autistic units at our school, and they fascinate me because I don't have the answers. So anything I don't have an answer to is like, oh, I got to figure this out. And I mean, it could be a word in a book I'm reading where I'm like, oh, I actually put my book down. I'm old fashioned. And yes, I do use Google. So I don't go to the dictionary, but I'll Google it and try to figure out what it means. So, I mean, curious about everything. If it's just whatever I don't know, I want to know about. I don't need to know all of the information, but just sometimes it's just the surface knowledge of, I never heard of that before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I struggle with, some of what you're saying with the kids who aren't curious. I mean, I find that so hard to identify with, because I feel like you and I are in a lot of ways cut from the same cloth. I mean, I just want to know stuff. I'm kind of an info junkie. I just want to know. And so what is it you do? Like, I mean, because when I come against these kids who, I have these, conversations where it's like, well, don't you want to know? Don't you want to like figure this out?
Yeah.
And they very honestly sometimes will just answer, no, I don't want to know. I'm not curious. I don't care about, anything that I've been able to uncover. So how do you kickstart that fire in those kids that you mentioned before that are the really hard cases?
It takes some time and I think a lot of patience, and you have to realize, okay, I'm not going to get them the first time. And now it's like the 300th time and I still didn't quite get them to open up. But I think sometimes bringing in stuff that is new and novel to them. So a lot of times will show a short little, no more than 2-minute video of a person that takes dominoes and makes Starry Night out of it, and then knocks the first domino, and they all fall down, and it's this beautiful artwork on the floor. Or there's a fantastic artist, and I at a loss for words of his name right now, but will paint upside down, and then at the last moment he flips it, and so the whole time the kids are like, what? Oh, it's a horse, it's a this, it's a that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it flips and it's nothing they guess. So it's bringing, and it might not really have much to do with our project whatsoever, but it's bringing something into their world that they truly have never seen before. And I find that to be the one thing that really kicks it off and it's hard. It might take 3 or 4 or 5 or 600 rounds of trying different things, but it's looking for these really, like, I guess, oddities. Maybe if Barnum and Bailey were around, like the beginning of a circus, like these oddities that were like, wow, like a mind blown. So that's kind of my approach, especially like you said, with those kids that are a little more hard to reach and hard to like really get them to realize it's fun to be curious.
Yeah. There's and bringing in the novelty so they have no choice but to be curious about whatever it is.
Yeah, completely.
It reminds me of, back in the early days of the internet, there was a popular website. I think it was just called What Is It? And they would unearth these photos of just household objects, but usually from, anywhere from the 1600s on to, slightly before today. And then you'd have to try and figure out what it is. And then they'd tell you after a week. So there's these whole flurry of forum comments and stuff, because that's, how the internet worked at that time, about,
right.
What is it? What is it? What is it? And people would try and figure out. And it was before you could just, show the picture to Google and then the AI would be like, oh, it's this thing, right? So come to think of it, that's probably why that site died. Darn it. But I would just
possibly. I do recall it though. Actually, I don't know if
I can't remember if that's what it was called, but it was.
No, but I know what you're talking about. I think they actually turned it into a TV show at one point too. I could be wrong, but I do recall that. The other one is when they do something and they magnify it like 300 magnification, and you're like, you have to try to guess what it is, and your first guess is like, oh, it's a flower. And then it ends up being like, I don't know, a baked potato with sour cream. And you're like, well, man, I was way off. But yeah, it's that kind of stuff that I think when we see something that we just can't fathom, that's what gets us to be like excited about it.
Perspective, I think, is kind of what we're talking about here. Yeah,
very much so. Both physical, in the art world, the perspective of how you're going to draw and what you see, as well as in more of the psychological world of where we all have a different viewpoint and what perspective can we see things through.
Yeah, just talking about, bias. Yeah, that makes me think of just, years ago I used to do a marketing unit advertising unit with my grade 10 English class. And it was always fun to find, the same object, but depicted in different ways, just through different advertising methods, and just how one thing could be so positive and other times it would be so negative. And it would just kind of open them up to the idea of just, even manipulation, which, that ties in with art pretty well, I think.
Yeah, completely. One thing I really love is showing not not like the optical illusion stuff, but the things that have like, the vase with where if you see, you either see the vase or you see the two faces.
Yeah.
So kind of like an optical illusion. But there's artists out there that have created massive artworks that up close, you see all these details, like it's a horse and it's a person walking up a trail. But then when you see it from farther away, it's like an old guy. Those are great. The kids love them. And like, I mean, they eat it up like candy. But it's pretty fun. I enjoy. I'll have to send you a link of some of the images or the PowerPoint I have that I put together, because they just sit there in awe and they're like, "What? I didn't see that." And I'm like, "I know, isn't it cool?"
That's another thing too that I'm coming to peace with, is just even that idea of showing something to a student and just being able to just get them to go, "Whoa," right? And sometimes that's enough for a day, right? You can just be like, "Look at this, isn't this cool?"
Definitely. Just to me, one of the best things is by the end of the class of someone saying, "I drew it," and I'm like, "I knew you could the whole time." And I don't play it up too much because I don't want them to feel like, I know as a kid for myself, I was very shy. So if there was too much attention put on me, I kind of shut down a bit. So I'm like, "I knew you could do it." And then give them a high five, come over, I'll look at it, we'll talk about what they did. But when you hear just those, "I did it," or "Oh my gosh, this is cool," or you hear one of their peers say something to them, as simple as, "That looks really neat." That can make your day. The most simplest of things.
Absolutely. One more thing I want to touch on here. You talk about soul connection.
I do a lot.
Yeah, you do. I mean, even like, I think that probably ties in with your Twitter handle, the heARTIST. So well done, by the way, for your pun name.
Thank you. It's been there for that's been my motto for about 15, since I've been teaching. Yeah. About 15 years.
So what does that mean then, the soul connection?
For me, it is art for me has always been healing. Life has not always been easy. My parents divorced when I was really young, going into middle school. I didn't really quite fit in. I was in gifted, as they called it back then. So in the advanced classes, but I also was like the art kid. So I didn't really fit anywhere, but I fit everywhere, which was, if that makes sense, but no sense. And so art was always healing for me. That was where I could go and I could get my emotions out on paper, and I could truly self-express and truly be who I was. And I guess it's turned more into realizing that we all need to be able to be heard and express somehow, so we can connect to that deep inside soul of who we are. We're able to then connect to that other person in a very authentic and meaningful way. A lot goes back to, which is very high talked about word right now, is building relationships with your students. You can build a great relationship, but if you're not connected at that soul level of being authentic, and bringing, here's all of me. I've had my good days and my bad days. I've shared with my students, those who say like, "Oh, I'm going to my parents' house, my dad's house this week." I'm like, "Hey, my parents were divorced too." But once that happens, it's more than just "Hey, we're in the same class. I teach you, you teach me." It's our hearts, where I do the capital ART. Our hearts have connected. We've shared something both dear to our heart, but in a very artistic way, is how I see it.
So if your kids walk out of your art room with one skill solidly in place, what is that for you?
It would be to use their voice. However that is possible, except through violence, of course. They hear me preach that quite a bit, is but I want them to be able to be comfortable using their voice, because I lost mine for many years. I just obviously I spoke up and talked, but I didn't reach out and say, this is what I need, or this is who I am. So I want them to be able to walk out and own their voice and know that it has meaning, and it deserves to be heard.
Right. And why the focus on, on the emphasis on nonviolence? Other than the obvious.
There's the typical, like, it's just not appropriate for school, but I don't think we need to add any more negativity into this world. I probably should backtrack and probably should have said, I'm not a religious person, but very spiritual. And so to me, the more peace we can bring, the more we can get done. Because when you do see violence, or you see that bickering, it really puts up walls, and I think it's a deterrent. We become defensive. We are not able to hear what the other person's saying. We get very jaded, and so I want them to be able to know that if you can talk to someone peacefully, you're going to get a lot more out of it than if you kind of create a wall there with a very violent negativity that comes along. Mm-hmm. Just as a kid, have always been the one that tries to make the peace with people. So I guess it's just kind of a little bit of who I am in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that really dovetails nicely with what you're saying about teaching kids curiosity. I mean, if we're curious about, everything, but certainly other people's perspectives, and we're used to having our own perspective shifted, then, that's a fantastic way to diffuse conflict.
Yes, very much so. I say this a lot, but nothing stands alone. Everything is completely intertwined. We can't have the trees without the water, and without this, even in nature, nothing stands by itself. And I think that goes to, it goes along with education. And if we want to really be able to get to know somebody, we've got to kind of put down some barriers. And then once we get to know someone, the relationships get better. And then once the relationships get better, we're able to learn more. And then we get a little bit more curious. It's this wild web that just keeps growing and growing. And it can be beautiful, or it can be destructive if you kind of allow it to be.
Beautiful. I love it. I feel like this is a good place to just say, yeah, we've got it. It feels like this is a real whole pedagogy, to use the word. Well, Kate, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
I'm honored to have been asked. I've been so excited as the countdown for New Year's came, and I was like, wait, I have another countdown. So this has been an honor to be able to chat with you. And I'm excited to be one of your first art teachers on here, and hopefully we get some more.
Yeah, you are the first art teacher, period. So you are leading the way.
So there's many more out there. We're trying to make a difference.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing. Before we go, how can people get in touch with you if they want to know more?
The easiest right now is probably through Twitter, which is at heARTIST at work. So heARTIST at work. I am on Facebook, but I don't go on there that often. And if they would like to, they're welcome to email peaceloveart3@gmail.com. Check that pretty often, just because you never know what comes through. Even questions, curiosities. Hey, can you help me figure out a lesson plan? My thing is always, ideas are free, and I'm happy to share. So would be happy to support anyone else that's kind of in the, I don't know what to do.
Fantastic. All right. Well, once again, Kate, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you too.
All right. Well, you take care and have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. This week's episode of Ed is also brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. It's a network of Alberta-made podcasts that cover all sorts of topics, including the show Emily Missed Out. It's a podcast involving Emily and Brienne watching classic pulp culture-filled movie gems that up until now, Emily has never seen. So you can join them while they unearth and consume a film each week as they try to determine if Emily missed out. You can find it and all the other Alberta Podcast Network shows at albertapodcastnetwork.com. And if you want to get in touch with me or you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me at theedpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. If you want to listen to more of Ed, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podbean.com, or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcatcher of your choice. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed can also be heard on Voice Ed Radio. It's 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of myself and Kate, thank you so much for listening, and catch you next time. Bye.